Good evening. Thank you for joining me tonight. I will be speaking about women's fashion from 1830 to 1880. Fashion is not the same as we see it today. Fashion back in 1830 to 1880, women would not be dead in leggings. They would not be caught dead in leggings or a sweater out in public. It was just unheard of during this time. That was not a fashion statement in the way that it is today. Fashion in 1830 to 1880 was increasingly slender with heavy decorations. Throughout the decade, the focus of the design was concentrated to the back of the dress. It was common for the upper class to have dresses for specific times of the day. So in the morning time, they would have a dress for at home. In the afternoon, they would have a dress for going out to lunch. In the evening time, they would have dresses for social gatherings, and that showed their social status and their dress. So quickly, I just want to walk through some of the staples of each decade. So starting in 1830, they had large ornate sleeves, large skirts embellished with various pleats and trimmings. They had gigot sleeves, which is also a name for its resemblance to a sheep's hind leg. It was wide at the top and more narrow toward the bottom. They had skirts that were ankle length. And around 1834, sleeves started to calm down a little bit, so they were not as large as they were. Moving into 1840, they had low and sloping shoulders on their neckline. They had bell-shaped skirts that grew throughout the decade. Their hair was parted down the middle with ringlets on the sides, and they had accessories including paisley or crochet shawls and linen caps with lace or a fashionable bonnet. 1850, their dresses were domed and bell-shaped skirts. They were supported by Carolyn petticoats, which is a stiffer material than just a traditional petticoat. They had long bloomers that were trimmed with lace. Their accessories were bonnets specifically, and their hair was still a center part with curls down the side, so not much change between 1840 and 1850. In 1860, however, there was a significant change in the dress specifically. So they had tight bodices with high necklines, and they buttoned down the front, which is much different than what we had seen in the past couple of decades. They had low sloping shoulders that flared into wide sleeves. They had a full bell-shaped skirt, but in 1865, the volume of that skirt moved to the back side of the dress. Their hair was parted down the middle and tied into low buns at the nape, the bottom of their neck, and loops or ringlets covered their ears. And then they had for accessories, their evening wear included things like floral wreaths, ostrich feathers, butterflies. So these ladies went all out for their accessories during this time. So that in the 1870s, there was an emphasis on the back of the skirt. They had long trains, and their waist had lowered on their bodices. So they had elongated and tight bodice that flattened the front of the skirt. And then they had low square necklines. So you had more of a lower across your chest. It was a little lower. Their hair was pulled back with twists and rolls falling to their shoulders, and they had ribbons and bands and decorative combs in their hair as accessories. But also they had small hats that were tilted forward toward the forehead. So looking at some pictures as I was doing research, it was pretty interesting to see those hats. In 1880, they had tight-fitting bodices with narrow sleeves and a high neckline, so also pretty different than what we just saw the previous decade. Their hair was worn tight, and they had close curls on the top of their head, and their accessories included hats and caps that were small and neat to fit on the top of their hairstyles. So they just went right on top of how they had their hair. So in conclusion, it's interesting, I think, to walk through the decades of the fashion and compare them, and just to see how drastically trends have changed in such a short time, even during 1830 to 1880. And now just looking at today and our fashion now versus even what it was then. So thank you for listening.